beach at Hakata Bay on the morning of August 16th, 1281, does not look like a beach anymore. A samurai named Takazaki Suenaga walks to the water's edge and stops. He has been fighting for 2 months. He knows what a battlefield looks like. He has seen what happens when arrows find men, when swords find gaps in armor, when small boats full of Japanese warriors board Mongol ships in darkness and fight hand to hand on slippery decks. He has seen all of that on this coastline over the past weeks. He has not seen anything like this. The bay is covered in wreckage. Ships, or what used to be ships, stretching from the shore to the horizon in every direction. Masts broken like twigs. Hulls split open and turned upside down. Rigging tangled across the water in enormous knots. Bodies, thousands of them, floating face down in the shallow water, washing gently against the shore with the same rhythm as the waves. Yesterday, this bay held the largest fleet ever assembled in human history. 4,400 ships, 140,000 soldiers, the full weight of the Mongol Empire, the force that had destroyed Baghdad, burned the Kievan Rus, swept through China and Korea and Persia and half of Europe, pointed directly at Japan. This morning, it is gone. Not defeated, not driven back, gone. Destroyed overnight by something no army could fight, and no commander could order, and no amount of preparation could have produced. The Mongols called it weather. The Japanese called it something else. They called it the divine wind, kamikaze. And that name, born on this beach, on this morning, looking at this wreckage, would outlast the Mongol Empire, outlast the samurai who gave it, outlast everything. It would travel 7 centuries forward in time and become the last words spoken by thousands of young men climbing into planes they would never climb out of. It started 7 years earlier, with a letter. Kublai Khan had a problem with letters. He sent them to Japan starting in 1266. Polite at first, diplomatic. The standard language of Mongol correspondence to kingdoms that had not yet submitted. Acknowledge the Khan's authority, send tribute, become a vassal state, and everything will be fine. The alternative was left implicit, but clear to anyone who had watched what happened to the Song dynasty, to Persia, to every other civilization that had received these letters and made the wrong choice. Japan ignored them, not carefully, not with diplomatic hedging or requests for more time. The Japanese military government, the bakufu, the shogunate that held the real power while the emperor sat in ceremonial isolation in Kyoto, simply did not respond. Several of Kublai's envoys were turned back at the border. At least one was executed. This was not how things went with Kublai Khan. By 1271, he had renamed his empire the Yuan dynasty and declared himself Emperor of China. He had already absorbed Korea as a vassal state. His forces had pushed into Vietnam, into Burma, into every corner of the known world that still remained outside Mongol control. He was the grandson of Genghis Khan, the man who had once told a defeated king that God had ordered the Mongols to conquer the world, and the only question was when. And he had inherited both the ambition and the machinery to pursue it. Japan was an island. It was 100 miles from Korea across the Tsushima Strait. It was wealthy, it was unsubmitted, and it had now been ignoring his letters for 8 years. In 1274, he decided to stop writing. The invasion force he assembled was enormous by the standards of the time. 900 ships, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 soldiers, Mongol cavalry officers commanding units of Korean and Chinese infantry, the same combination that had proved devastatingly effective in every land campaign the empire had fought. They carried weapons Japan had never encountered: explosive bombs, poisoned arrows, coordinated mass archery that could darken the sky with projectiles before a single sword was drawn. They landed on Tsushima Island first. Tsushima sits in the middle of the Tsushima Strait, exactly halfway between Korea and Kyushu. It was the obvious first target. Take Tsushima and Iki Island beyond it, and you control the approach to the Japanese mainland. The local defenders were outnumbered catastrophically. The deputy governor of Tsushima, a man named So Sukekuni, organized what resistance he could. He led roughly 80 mounted samurai against the landing force, 80 men against 30,000. He died on the beach. His men died with him. Tsushima fell in hours. Iki Island fell the same way. Then the fleet turned toward Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's main islands. The the gateway to everything beyond. They entered Hakata Bay. What waited for them there was not what they expected. The samurai of Kyushu were not the disciplined mass formations the Mongols had faced in China and Korea. They were warriors trained from childhood in individual combat, skilled beyond almost anything in the known world with sword and bow, bred in a culture where personal honor and the manner of fighting mattered as much as the outcome. They charged into the Mongol formations on horseback, the way samurai had always fought, directly, personally, seeking individual glory. The Mongols had no idea what to do with this, not because it frightened them, because it was irrelevant to how they fought. Mongol tactics were built around coordinated unit movement, massed arrows, explosive projectiles to break formations before infantry engagement, cavalry feints designed to lure enemies into pursuit and then destroy them with flanking attacks. These tactics had broken every army that faced them for 50 years. They were designed for opponents who fought in organized formations, because organized formations could be outmaneuvered, could be surrounded, could be broken as a unit. A samurai charging alone at full gallop toward the center of your line was not an organized formation. He was also very hard to stop. The fighting at Hakata Bay was unlike anything either side had experienced. The explosives arrived first. Ceramic shells packed with gunpowder, fired from catapults on the Mongol ships before the armies even closed to sword range. They did not need to hit a man directly. They detonated on impact and sent fragments in every direction. And more than fragments, a concussion that the Japanese had no framework for. No weapon in Japanese military experience made that sound. No weapon created that pressure in the chest, that disorientation, that specific combination of noise and heat and destruction that arrived without warning from a direction nobody had been looking. The horses panicked first, trained war horses that had carried samurai through dozens of campaigns breaking formation and throwing their riders because nothing in their training had prepared them for this either. A samurai unhorsed in the middle of a Mongol formation had approximately the same odds as a samurai on foot, charging into coordinated arrow fire from 3 directions simultaneously, which is what happened next. The Japanese took catastrophic losses, but they kept coming. Individual warriors fighting with a ferocity that even Mongol veterans found unsettling. The battle ground on through the day, with neither side achieving a decisive result. By evening, the Mongols had pushed inland several miles. The Japanese defense was not broken, but it was bending. The numbers were wrong. 4,000 defenders against 40,000 attackers, and numbers eventually tell. The Mongol commanders made a decision to withdraw to their ships overnight, rest, resupply, continue in the morning. They would not get a morning. Sometime during the night, the accounts disagree on whether it was a full typhoon or a severe storm, the first invasion's weather being less documented than the second. The wind changed. The fleet anchored in Hakata Bay was caught in open water in deteriorating conditions. Ships dragged their anchors. Vessels collided. The combination of storm damage and Japanese attacks that had already weakened the fleet proved catastrophic. Approximately 13,000 men drowned. A third of the ships were destroyed or rendered unseaworthy. By the time the sun rose on Hakata Bay, the invasion was over. What remained of the fleet limped back to Korea. Japan had survived. But Kublai Khan was not the kind of man who accepted this result. He had been building toward Japan for years. He had the resources of the largest empire in history behind him. One storm and one night of bad luck was not going to change his intentions. He would come back. Japan had approximately 7 years to figure out what to do about that. 7 years is not a long time to prepare for the end of your civilization. It is also not nothing. The Japanese had watched what happened at Tsushima. 80 samurai against 30,000. The deputy governor dead on the beach before the sun was fully up. They had watched the Mongol formations at Hakata Bay, the massed arrows, the explosions, the coordinated unit movements that turned individual samurai courage into something the enemy could simply root around. They understood now what they were dealing with. Not raiders, not a rival clan. The full military machine of the most powerful empire on earth pointed directly at them. They built a wall, not a metaphor, an actual wall, 19 kilometers long, 2 meters high, running the entire length of Hakata Bay, the most obvious landing point on Kyushu, the place where the Mongols had come ashore in 1274 and would almost certainly come ashore again. The inner face was sloped so mounted, archers could ride up and fire from height. The outer face was sheer stone. designed to prevent anyone climbing it from the beachside. It took years to build and consumed enormous resources, and when it was finished, it transformed Hakata Bay from an open beach into a fortified position. They also built boats, small ones, fast ones, specifically designed not to fight the Mongol fleet directly. That was impossible, but to harass it, to conduct raids in darkness, to board Mongol ships before they could land, kill as many soldiers as possible, and retreat before the full weight of the fleet could respond. The Japanese had watched how the Mongols fought on land and understood they could not match them formation for formation. So they changed the terms, make the sea itself dangerous, make the nights costly, force the Mongols to spend their energy and their men defending their own ships rather than landing on Japanese shores. They drilled the samurai clans of Kyushu into something approaching a coordinated defense force. The Bakufu, the military government, called in obligations from clans across the island, organized command structures, positioned forces at likely landing points. The individual brilliance of the samurai warrior had not saved them in 1274. What might save them was organization, and they prayed. This is not a detail to skip over. The prayer was not incidental. It was a central part of Japan's preparation. The retired Emperor Kameyama went on pilgrimage to the Ise Grand Shrine, the most sacred site in Japan, and prayed for divine intervention. Buddhist temples across the country held continuous services. Shinto priests performed rituals at every major shrine on Kyushu. The entire country was in a state of sustained religious mobilization, not as a substitute for military preparation, but alongside it, because the Japanese understood that what was coming was beyond the scale of what military preparation alone could address. Kublai Khan, meanwhile, had spent 7 years getting angrier. He had sent more envoys after 1274. Japan had executed them, not turned them back, executed them. This was a deliberate and calculated insult. In the diplomatic language of the medieval world, killing an envoy was about as clear a statement of intent as it was possible to make. Japan was telling Kublai Khan that it did not recognize his authority, did not fear his power, and would not be negotiating. He had also been busy. The years between 1274 and 1281 had seen the final conquest of the Song dynasty of southern China, a campaign that gave Kublai access to the entire Song naval fleet, the most sophisticated maritime force in Asia, hundreds of ships, experienced sailors, the technology and expertise of a civilization that had been building ocean-going vessels for centuries. Combined with the Korean ships he already controlled, Kublai now had the capacity to build an invasion fleet that dwarfed anything he had sent in 1274. He built two, not one fleet, two separate invasion forces designed to converge on Japan simultaneously from different directions. The Eastern Route Army sailed from Korea, roughly 40,000 soldiers on 900 ships. The Southern Route Army sailed from southern China, approximately 100,000 soldiers on 3,500 ships. Together, they represented something the world had never seen. Between 100 and 140,000 soldiers, a force so large that when it assembled in the waters around Kyushu, the ships stretched from horizon to horizon. The two fleets were supposed to meet at Iki Island and coordinate their assault. The Eastern Route Army arrived first. Rather than wait for the Southern Route Army, they attacked Tsushima and Iki Island, the same opening move as 1274, and then moved on Hakata Bay. The wall was waiting for them. The Mongol commanders looked at the sheer stone face rising from the beach at Hakata Bay and understood immediately what it meant. There would be no easy landing here, no riding onto an open beach and forming up in the shallow water. The wall covered every approach. Behind it, mounted archers waited on the sloped inner face. The advantages that had pushed the Japanese back in 1274, the explosives, the massed arrows, the coordinated formations, were neutralized by the simple fact that the Mongols could not get off their ships in the right place. They began searching for landing points the wall didn't cover. That search took time the Japanese used. The small fast boats came out at night. The first raid happened before the Southern Route Army had even arrived. The Eastern Route Army, the force that had come from Korea, had been anchored in the waters around Hakata Bay for weeks, unable to land because of the wall, unable to leave because they were waiting for the Southern fleet. They were sitting targets in the dark. A warrior named Kusano Jiro understood this better than anyone. He was not a famous commander. He was not a senior officer with an army behind him. He was a samurai with a boat, a small group of men, and a specific understanding of what darkness on the water could do. On a night in late June or early July 1281, the exact date is not recorded, which is itself telling, because what he did was so outside normal military practice that nobody quite knew how to document it. He brought his boat alongside a Mongol vessel in the anchorage, not charging, not announcing himself, moving quietly through water that should have been impassable for a single small craft in the middle of an enemy fleet. He climbed the hull. The Mongol ships were high-sided, designed for transporting soldiers across open water, not for fighting off men who appeared from below the rail in the middle of the night. Kusano and his men came over the rail before the watch could respond. What happened on that deck lasted minutes. By the time the surrounding ships understood that something was happening and could organize a response, Kusano's boat was already pulling away into the darkness. He had a Mongol commander's head with him when he left. He was not alone for long. Other samurai saw what was possible. The night raids became a nightly reality for the Mongol fleet. Small boats moving through the anchorage in darkness, finding individual vessels isolated from the main formation, boarding and withdrawing before any coordinated response was possible. The Mongols strung lanterns along the sides of their ships. They posted more watches. They moved vessels into tighter formations. Nothing worked. The Japanese knew these waters. The Mongols did not. The raids did not destroy the fleet. That was never the point. The point was to make the fleet pay a cost every single night for staying in those waters. To make the waiting, the weeks of sitting at anchor unable to land, into something that killed men steadily and eroded the certainty that the fleet was safe where it sat. It worked well enough that when the commanders finally decided to lash the ships together for protection, the decision felt rational, defensible. The chains would stop the night raids. The chains would keep the fleet intact. The chains were still in place. On August 15th, 1281, as the combined force was finally preparing to launch its full assault on the Japanese shore, the sky darkened in the south. The samurai on the walls of Hakata Bay looked at the horizon. They had been praying for 7 years. The typhoon hit without warning. Not a storm, not bad weather, a full typhoon. The kind that forms in the warm waters south of Japan in late summer. The kind that moves fast and hits hard and leaves nothing standing in its path. The kind that Japanese sailors had learned over generations to fear above everything else the sea could produce. The Mongol fleet had no such generational knowledge. The ships that Kublai had assembled for the second invasion were not built for open water typhoons. Many of them had been constructed hastily. The demand for 4,000 vessels in a short time frame meant corners were cut, materials were inadequate, hulls were built flat-bottomed for river and coastal use rather than deep-keeled for ocean conditions. Korean shipbuilders who knew better had raised concerns during construction. Those concerns had been noted and ignored. The invasion timetable did not allow for properly built ships, and those ships were chained together. The decision to lash the fleet into a defensive formation against Japanese night raids had made tactical sense in calm water. A connected fleet was harder to penetrate, harder to pick apart vessel by vessel. The chains had worked exactly as intended during the weeks of waiting off Kyushu's coast. When the typhoon hit, the chains became a death sentence. A ship caught in a typhoon needs to move, needs to run before the wind, to turn into the waves, to give the helmsman options. Navigation in extreme weather is a constant series of adjustments, reading the sea, reading the wind, keeping the bow pointed in the direction that gives the hull its best chance of surviving the next wave. Experienced sailors in well-built ships still died in typhoons. Without maneuverability, the odds dropped to almost nothing. The chained ships could not maneuver. When one vessel was driven by the wind, it pulled the ships beside it. When a wave hit one hull, it transmitted force through the chains to every hull connected to it. The fleet that had been designed as a single coordinated weapon became a single coordinated catastrophe. 4,000 ships destroying each other in the dark. The noise must have been extraordinary. Not the noise of battle. Battle has a rhythm. Attack and response. Charge and retreat. The back and forth of organized violence. This had no rhythm. This was the sound of 4,000 ships being destroyed simultaneously, in complete darkness, each one pulling the ones beside it toward the same end. A Korean sailor named in no surviving account, one of the tens of thousands of men conscripted into Kublai's fleet, given no choice about the crossing, given no stake in whether Japan was conquered or not, would have experienced it something like this. The wind arriving first as sound, a low, sustained note that grew until it was not a note anymore, but a physical pressure. The ship beginning to move not from sail or oar, but from the storm itself pushing the hull sideways, the chains going taut, the vessel beside him, a transport, 100 men aboard, pulled in a different direction by a different section of wind, the chain between them transmitting force neither ship was built to absorb. Then the sound of the chain finding its limit, not snapping, not immediately, groaning first, the specific sound of metal under load that has exceeded what it was designed for. Then the hull planking on his own ship beginning to work, the individual boards flexing against each other as the structural stress spread from the chain, attachment point through the entire vessel. Then the water coming in, not a wave over the rail, from below, from the seams between planks that had been adequate in calm water and were not adequate now. The darkness made it worse. There was no way to see what was coming, no way to anticipate the next wave or the next gust or which direction the ship beside you would be driven next. Every impact was unexpected. Every sound could be the last one. Men who could swim jumped into the water. The water killed most of them, not by drowning immediately, but by hypothermia and exhaustion, and the wreckage churning through the waves in every direction. Men who could not swim stayed on the ships. The ships killed most of them when they broke apart. The Korean soldier, the Chinese conscript, the Mongol officer who had ridden from the steppe to the sea for this campaign and understood nothing about what water could do in a typhoon. None of them had chosen to be in that bay. None of them had a stake in Kublai Khan's ambition. They were there because the empire that had absorbed their countries had required their presence. The storm did not distinguish between them and the men who had given the orders. On the walls of Hakata Bay, the samurai watched. There was nothing else to do. The typhoon was not something they could fight or direct or influence. They stood on the stone wall that had cost years and enormous resources to build, the wall that had held the Mongols at bay for weeks, that had forced the fleet to stay at sea instead of landing. And they watched the wind do what armies could not. By dawn, it was over. The same beach, the same horizon, but now it meant something different. The wall, the chains, the prayers. 7 years of preparation converging with one night of weather to produce something that looked, to everyone who witnessed it, exactly like divine intervention. The soldiers who survived the storm and reached the shore were not saved. The samurai came down from the walls. What followed in the days after the typhoon was systematic and without mercy. Mongol and Chinese and Korean soldiers who had swum ashore, who had clung to wreckage and been pushed to land, who had survived the night only to find themselves on a Japanese beach with no fleet behind them and samurai in front of them. They were hunted down. Most were killed where they were found. The accounts describe samurai moving through the beaches and coastal forests of Kyushu for days, finding survivors of the fleet, killing them. One group was spared. The Chinese soldiers, Kublai's Chinese subjects, forced into an invasion most of them had no stake in, were reportedly allowed to live, on the reasoning that they were not voluntary enemies of Japan. The Mongols and Koreans were not extended this consideration. Of the 140,000 soldiers who had sailed from Korea and southern China, historians estimate that fewer than 1 in 5 returned home. Some drowned in the typhoon. Some were killed on the beaches. Some were taken as slaves. The vast majority simply never came back. The fleet that had stretched from horizon to horizon was reduced to a few hundred damaged vessels limping back across the Korea Strait. Kublai Khan received the news in his palace at Dadu. He began planning a third invasion immediately. He ordered another fleet built. He demanded tribute from Japan again, one final time, the envoys carrying the same language as the letters that had started all of this 15 years earlier. Japan executed them again. The third invasion never happened. Kublai spent the remaining years of his reign attempting to organize it and failing. The resources weren't there. The appetite for another catastrophic loss wasn't there. The internal pressures of running an empire that stretched from the Pacific to the edges of Europe demanded his attention in too many other directions. He died in 1294, still intending to try again. Japan watched and waited and prayed and prepared. The invasion never came. The invasion never came. And that absence, that specific silence where a third Mongol fleet never appeared on the horizon, shaped Japan more profoundly than the invasions themselves. Think about what Japan had experienced between 1274 and 1281. The most powerful military force in the world had tried twice to destroy it. Both times the fleets had been devastated by storms the Japanese interpreted as divine intervention. Both times Japan had survived when survival seemed impossible. Both times the gods had sent the wind. The conclusion was not subtle. Japan was sacred. Japan was protected. The gods themselves would not allow it to fall. This belief had existed before the invasions. The idea of Japan as a divine land, ruled by an emperor descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, protected by the gods who had created the islands, was embedded in Japanese culture long before Kublai Khan sent his first letter. What the kamikaze did was provide proof, visible, undeniable, historical proof that the divine protection was real. 2 fleets, 2 storms, 2 miracles on demand. The legend became fact. It shaped Japanese foreign policy for centuries. The conviction that the islands could not be conquered, that any enemy who came by sea would be destroyed by the same forces that had destroyed Kublai's armadas. It shaped military thinking, religious practice, national identity. The shrines built to commemorate the divine wind still exist. The prayers that Kameyama offered at Ise became part of a religious tradition that continued for generations. And it shaped something else, something that would matter enormously 6 centuries later. Japan's response to the invasions was not just religious, it was also deeply political in ways that would have consequences nobody in 1281 could have anticipated. The samurai who had fought on the beaches of Kyushu expected reward. That was how the system worked. Fight for. The Bakufu receive land and recognition in return. The fighters at Tsushima and Hakata Bay had done everything right. They had held the walls. They had conducted the night raids. They had stood on the shore and watched the typhoon destroy what they could not. But the Bakufu had nothing to give them. The problem was that the Mongols had not left anything behind to redistribute. In a normal war, the victors took territory, took wealth, took the possessions of the defeated. There was something concrete to divide among those who had earned a share. The kamikaze had not left them anything to divide. The enemy fleet was at the bottom of the sea. The enemy soldiers were dead on the beaches. There was no conquered territory, no seized treasury, no tangible product of victory to distribute as reward. The samurai who had defended Japan went unrewarded. Some were compensated eventually. Takazaki Suenaga himself commissioned the famous scrolls depicting the battles partly as a personal, lobbying effort to receive recognition he felt he was owed. He got some. Most did not get enough. Many got nothing. The resentment this produced eroded the Bakufu's authority over the following decades. The military government that had organized Japan's defense had been unable to pay for it. The clans that had provided the fighters began to question why their loyalty to the Bakufu was worth maintaining if the Bakufu could not fulfill its obligations in return. The political fractures created by the unpaid debts of 1281 contributed to the instability that eventually brought down the Kamakura shogunate in 1333, less than 60 years after the second invasion. The divine wind had saved Japan. The aftermath of the divine wind helped destroy the government that had been there to receive it. Both of those things were true simultaneously. The legend itself grew undisturbed through all of this. Political systems rose and fell. Shogunates replaced shogunates. The emperor remained in ceremonial isolation in Kyoto, while real power moved from one military clan to another. But the story of the kamikaze, the divine wind that destroyed the Mongol fleet, became one of the foundational myths of Japanese identity. The proof that Japan was different, protected, unconquerable. For 6 centuries, this belief sat in Japanese culture doing mostly harmless work, inspiring religious observance, shaping national pride, feeding the conviction that the islands were special in ways other places were not. Then Japan lost a war, not gradually, catastrophically. By the summer of 1944, the United States Navy was advancing island by island across the Pacific toward the Japanese home islands. The industrial capacity of America was producing ships and planes faster than Japan could destroy them. The math was becoming impossible. Every military calculation pointed toward the same conclusion. Japan could not win a conventional war against this enemy. Vice Admiral Onishi Takejiro had a different kind of calculation. If conventional weapons could not stop the American fleet, then unconventional ones would have to. Specifically, pilots. Trained Japanese pilots willing to fly their planes directly into American warships. Human bombs. One pilot, one plane, one ship. The logic was brutal but coherent. A plane carrying a skilled pilot trying to hit a moving target would miss most of the time. A plane that was itself the weapon, guided by a human being committed to impact, would hit far more reliably. He needed a name for the program. He chose kamikaze. The choice was not accidental. It was theological. The same divine wind that had destroyed Kublai Khan's fleet would destroy the American fleet. Japan was still sacred. Japan was still protected. The gods had sent the wind in 1281, and they would send it again, this time in the form of young men in aircraft rather than autumn typhoons. The pilots would be the divine wind. They would do what the weather had done. They would save the islands. Onishi presented the idea to the first group of volunteer pilots at Mabalacat Air Base in the Philippines on October 19, 1944. He did not order them. He asked. He told them the conventional air war was not working. He told them Japan needed something different. He told them he was asking for volunteers to form a special attack unit, pilots who would fly their planes directly into American ships. He told them the unit would be named the Special Attack Corps. He told them the unit's name, the name of the wind they would become, was kamikaze. The accounts say there was silence in the room. Then hands went up. Not all of them, but enough. Young men, most of them in their late teens or early 20s. University students who had been pulled from their studies into cockpits, raising their hands to volunteer for missions they would not return from. Some of them wrote letters before their first missions. Some wrote poems. The letters that survived are not the letters of men who had been forced into something against their will. They are the letters of men who believed, who understood themselves as the inheritors of a tradition that went back to the beach at Hakata Bay in 1281, who believed that what the typhoon had done, they could do. A pilot named Hayashi Ichizo wrote to his mother before his mission in April 1945. He told her not to grieve. He told her he was not dying. He was becoming the wind. He told her that what he was doing was the same thing the divine wind had done 7 centuries earlier, protecting Japan, fulfilling the promise that the gods had made on the beach at Hakata Bay when they destroyed Kublai Khan's fleet. He flew his mission on April 12, 1945. He was 23 years old. He was one of 3,860. Between October 1944 and August 1945, they damaged or destroyed hundreds of American ships. They killed approximately 5,000 American sailors. They did not stop the American advance. They did not destroy the American fleet. They did not save Japan. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, the same date the typhoon hit in 1281. Whether that coincidence means anything depends entirely on what you believe about the divine wind. The Japanese military command that chose August 15th as the surrender date almost certainly knew the significance. Whether they chose it deliberately, as a final acknowledgement that the kamikaze had failed where the original kamikaze had succeeded, is not recorded. What is recorded is this. Takazaki Suenaga, standing on the beach at Hakata Bay in August 1281, looking at the wreckage of 4,000 ships and understanding that something extraordinary had happened, something that could only be explained one way. He was right that it was extraordinary. He was right that it demanded explanation. The explanation he reached for, divine protection, unconquerable sacred islands, the gods sending wind to destroy Japan's enemies, was the most natural explanation available to a man standing on that beach in that century with that worldview. It was also the explanation that sent those young men to their deaths, not because the men who gave the order were cynical or dishonest, because they believed it, because the legend was so old and so embedded and so confirmed by centuries of repetition that it had become something beyond question. The divine wind had saved Japan once. It would save Japan again. The wind did not come. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below. Did the kamikaze legend save Japan in 1281? Or doom it in 1945, or both? And does a belief that once saved a civilization become dangerous when the civilization changes around it? History has been sitting with that question for 7 centuries. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this one.